Sorry, 34, so I'm starting with 35. My dear King Yudhishthir, the demigods then approached the Lord. They were headed by Lord Brahma, King Indra, and Lord Shiva, and included great saintly personalities and the residents of Pitraloka, Shitaloka, Vidyaraloka, and the planet of the snakes. The Manus approached, and so did the chiefs of various other planets. The angelic dancers approached, as did the Gandharvas, the Charanas, and the Yakshas, and the inhabitants of Kinarloka and the Vetalas, the inhabitants of Kimpurushaloka, and the personal servants of Lord Vishnu, like Sunanda and Kumuda. All of them came near the Lord, who glowed with intense light. They individually offered their obeisance and prayers, their hands folded at their heads. Verse 40. Okay. Okay, so that was, I kind of missed one here, so I'll read that one. Somehow or other I missed it. Hiranyakashipu had been exactly like a fever of meningitis in the head of the three worlds. Thus, when the wives of the demigods in the heavenly planet saw that the great demon had been killed by the personal hands of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, their faces blossomed in great joy. The wives of the demigods again and again showered flowers from heaven upon Lord Nrsimhadev like rain. I'll just mention one thing. It says his Hiranyakashipu had been exactly like a fever of meningitis. So meningitis is when the covering of the brain and the covering of the nerves along the spinal cord become inflamed. And there's two types, bacterial and viral. And then out of those types, there are different types. Sometimes pneumonia and meningitis, sometimes tuberculosis and meningitis, And depending on the type and depending on your state of health, it can be more or less easily overcome. And if your state of health is not so good, for example, if you're very, very young, like a child or infant, or if you're very old, or if you have a compromised immune system, then this meningitis can be fatal. So, and of those, the worst one to get is TB meningitis. And I just have to say, in my own life, in '89, I had this TB meningitis. But for some reason, the doctors weren't able to accurately diagnose it immediately. So I went into a big coma, and my husband was told that I only had 12 hours to survive. That was 1989, and now it's 2017. But that was all by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada and the devotees who actually came during that time. Prabhupada came, of course, not in his physical form, but he was present. And the devotees were chanting. And even though I was completely unconscious and oblivious to my surroundings, which was in a hospital, the sound of the holy name penetrated, and I heard the chanting. And thus I was able to come out of that coma eventually. And from 12 hours to live in '89, somehow I'm here with all of you, able to serve by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada. So then, at that time, the airplanes of the demigods who desired to see the activities of the Supreme Lord Narayan crowded the sky. The demigods began beating drums and kettle drums, and upon hearing them, the angelic women began to dance, while the chiefs of the Gandharvas sang sweetly. So, now today's verse. Lord Brahma prayed, "My Lord, you are unlimited." He's speaking to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who has appeared as Lord Nrsimhadev. "My Lord, you are unlimited, and you possess unending potencies. No one can estimate or calculate your prowess and wonderful influence, for your actions are never polluted by the material energy. Through the material qualities, you very easily create the universe, maintain it, and again annihilate it. Yet you remain the same, without deterioration. I therefore offer my respectful obeisances unto you. The purport. The activities of the Lord are always wonderful. His personal servants, Jai and Vijay, were confidential friends, yet they were cursed, and they accepted bodies of demons. Again, in the family of one such demon, Prahlad Maharaj was caused to take birth, to exhibit the behavior of an exalted devotee. And then the Lord accepted the body of Nrsingadev to kill that same demon, who by the Lord's own will had taken birth in a demoniac family. Therefore, who can understand the Lord's transcendental activities? Not to speak of understanding the transcendental activities of the Lord, no one can understand even the activities of his servants. In Chaitanya Chaitamrita, Madhya 23:29, it is said, Tandra Vakya Kriya Mudra Vineha Na Bhujahya. No one can understand the activities of the Lord's servants. Therefore, what to speak of the activities of the Lord? Who can understand how Krishna is benefiting the entire world? The Lord is addressed as Duranta Shakti because no one can understand his potencies and how he acts. So we can repeat, Lord Brahma prayed. My Lord, you are unlimited, and you possess unending potencies. No one can estimate or calculate your prowess and wonderful influence, for your actions are never polluted by the material energy. Through the material qualities, you very easily create the universe, maintain it, and again annihilate it. Yet you remain the same, without deterioration. I therefore offer my respectful obeisances unto you. Om Agyantimirandasya Granana Sakalaya Chakchun Militam Zena Tasme Sri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paskatya Desatarine Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Hare Hare. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindhuvevyascha patitanam bhavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. We all have the wonderful great fortune, this term great fortune, we hear it a lot, but actually what else can be said? It is our great fortune to be here in this most auspicious of auspicious places during the most auspicious time of the year, Kartik. Srila Prabhupada described in a letter to Jayapataka Swami in 1969 that our Kartik season is kind of a concession for people who are not yet fixed in Krishna consciousness, to entice them to become active in some form of devotional service. And he compared it to a sale in a shop, just like a shopkeeper sometimes put things on sale to attract new customers. So Prabhupada said, for the devotees, we don't need a sale. We're always engaged, every minute, every hour of every day, in Krishna's devotional service. But for those who are not yet engaged, this Kartik season is calling you in. So, Tvam nasandarshito datra dustaram nashtitir satam kalim satyaharam pumsam karnadara ivaranam. We think that we have met your grace, your goodness by the will of providence, just so that we may accept you as captain of the ship for those who desire to cross over the ocean of Kali, which deteriorates all good qualities of a human being. So this beautiful verse was introduced to me in 1967 by Srila Prabhupada, when myself and my husband both had very similar dreams involving Srila Prabhupada. And so this was very early on in 1967, and we were wondering whether or not there was any significance to these dreams, because in both cases, what happened was we were in an unusual situation, and Srila Prabhupada appeared. In my case, it was along the ocean front in San Francisco, actually in the Bay Area, and all the tide had gone out. And there was these little like inlets of water, and then there was some mounds of sand. So it looked like maybe you could just walk across from one side to the other side. Above was the Golden Gate Bridge. But if anybody knows the truth of that area, His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, there is quicksand. It means if you put your foot in that sand, it sucks you in. And it can suck you in all the way over your head. It's very dangerous. You can lose your life. And if somebody is there and tries to pull you out, they can get sucked in. So it's not a good condition. And yet Srila Prabhupada appeared in a little boat, and he told me, get in. And I just immediately got in that boat. And then this verse was introduced, although I didn't know that verse at that time. And Shamsundar, my husband, he was, in his dream, he was driving Srila Prabhupada in a car. And if you know San Francisco, there's big hills up and down, very difficult driving. And this car was our temple car, and it was in terrible condition. The brakes were weak, and the front part would pop up at any given time, and the seat was kind of laid back so you weren't even sitting up straight. And he came to a stoplight on the hill. And Prabhupada said to him in his dream, Swamiji in those days, I will drive now. So Shamsundar, he knew Prabhupada didn't drive. We knew he didn't drive because I used to drive him. And one time I asked him, do you know how to drive? And he said, no. He said, but I had a car. So I was a little bit uneducated about how it was in India, that if you had in India at that time, if you had a car, you had a driver. So I was thinking, yeah, he's a Swami, he can just sit there and the car will do what he wants. But then he told me that his son knew how to drive. So we knew Prabhupada didn't know how to drive, and yet he said he wanted to drive. And so Shamsundar immediately, it was very difficult to say, but he just got out right away and moved over, and Prabhupada took the wheel. So we were wondering about those dreams, and we went to Srila Prabhupada, and we just asked him, does the spiritual master appear in a dream? And he said, yes, he can. And when we told him the dream, then he recited this beautiful verse that just left such a wonderful imprint on my heart that, we have met your goodness by the will of providence. So all of us here, we have met Srila Prabhupada by the will of providence. It's not an accident. There's no accidents in Krishna consciousness. Krishna doesn't make accidents. And Krishna has brought us to Srila Prabhupada. So, we're coming, you have been, I haven't been here for all the verses, but throughout this narration of Lord Nrsingadev, that was fueled by anger. Here we have this huge demoniac personality, and he's fueled by anger. So there's this kind of anger theme, and then in the end, the grand finale of the pastimes of not Lord Hiranyakashipu, although I think there's one verse that they mention, he's addressed like that because he's the king. Anyway, the grand finale is also one of anger when Sri Nrsingadev appears from the pillar with anger like you can't even describe it. And, this little wasp-like Hiranyakashipu was immediately demolished, And nobody could pacify him, nobody knew how to deal with him. And Prahlad was just there, completely peaceful with his folded hands. He was asked, go pacify him, nobody else could do that. And the Lord asked Prahlad, what do you want? Any benediction? You suffered so much on my behalf. What do you want? Any benediction? Don't speak to me like that. He said, I have seen why would I want anything in this material world? I saw my father. He was so powerful. He had so much. In an instant, in a second, by your will, it was finished. Why would I want anything except your lotus feet? So this, anger situation is like it says in Bhagavad-Gita, while contemplating the object of the senses, a person develops attachment for them. And from such attachment, lust develops. And from lust, anger. Anger arises. So one who is in Krishna conscious is not subjected to material desires while contemplating the objects of the senses. Because why? We don't want anything for ourselves. We know it all comes from Krishna, and therefore it belongs to Krishna. So why should I be cheap, and why should I steal something that belongs to Krishna? So therefore the devotee has the proper consciousness. But the senses, they require real engagement. And if they're not engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, then the senses will naturally seek some kind of engagement in the service of materialism. So in the material world, everyone is subjected to the influence of sense objects. And there's only one method to get out of this puzzle of material existence. And Prabhupada said very clearly, that is to become Krishna conscious. In the Mahabharata, it said that while ordinary arrows cut us once, the arrow of our words, harsh words, can burn the heart day and night. So a major drawback in today's world is the depersonalization of communications, of face-to-face communication. If you're face-to-face with somebody, even if you have something heavy on your mind, you'll temper it generally. You'll generally try to at least have a certain level of civilized communication. But nowadays, we're just faced with a non-personal, impersonal blank screen, or whether it's your computer, your iPad, your cell phone, whatever, but there's a blank screen. So somehow this quite often draws the worst and hugely negative, harmful words suddenly target unseen faces. We've probably all been there, hitting the send button and then quickly wishing, oh my God, I wish I hadn't done that. The Mahabharata explains that the word arrows, once released, cannot be retracted. So the real problem is anger. The enemy with the face of a friend. Description of this anger in the Mahabharata, an enemy with the face of a friend. We think that by giving someone a piece of our mind, by getting it off our chest, sometimes we think, well, I have to be honest, and we think we're going to feel better. We'll just speak our mind. But actually, we become more disturbed. I'm sure most of us have had that situation where you said it, okay, that's what I'm thinking, and you said it to the unsuspecting person, thinking you'll feel better when actually you just want to cringe. It wasn't at all bringing us a sense of relief. And sometimes you feel great remorse. So the Mahabharata says that the ordinary arrows cut us once, but the arrows of our words burn the heart day and night. So this is sadly true when the heat of exchange between persons who are near and dear. And sometimes it escalates. We see that it escalates beyond a verbal exchange. The Mahabharata says that sometimes persons under the influence of anger, they lose all sense. They just lose their sense of control, and they'll kill even a father or a son, as is the case of Hiranyakashipu, when he was trying in so many ways to kill Sri Prahlad. And during all of that time, Sri Prahlad was just remaining peaceful and serene. He wasn't even afraid because of his full connection with the absolute truth. So retaining this anger in the heart just consumes us with really negative thoughts. Lord Buddha said that retaining anger is just like holding a live coal in your hand, intending to throw it at someone. Can you imagine that? You're just holding on. Srila Bhakti-tirtha Maharaj used to remind us that if you're holding on to these negative thoughts, holding on to this anger, the only person getting burnt is the one holding on to the live coal. So in the Bhagavad-Gita, it's described that the dynamics of anger are a corollary of lust, a secondary emotion that's coming after we're frustrated with some desire. Krishna explains that how, by contemplating the senses, have some contemplation of some kind of, can be innocent sense pleasure, or it can be extremely gross. Either way, we're contemplating, and then we become attached to it, and then lust develops, and then inevitably frustration. Either we get what we want or we don't. Either way, it fails to satisfy us. And this anger leads to delusion, bewilderment, and combined entanglement in Maya. We don't like to say the Maya word so much nowadays, but she's alive and active. And we get involved in her mysteries, the intertwined, relentless modes in material nature. So it's explained that the key to reducing this anger is to reduce one's material attachment. And in the Gita it says that those of the demoniac mentality, they're constantly prone to anger due to their insatiable lust, being bound by a network of illusion. So advanced devotees do not experience material anger because they don't have material attachments. Such a personalities, they don't take personal offense even when they're affronted. Like everything else, a devotee uses anger only in Krishna's service. Srila Prabhupada writes that a devotee is generally very humble and very meek, and he's reluctant to pick a quarrel with anyone, nor does he envy anyone. However, a pure devotee immediately becomes fiery with anger when he sees that Lord Vishnu, or the devotee, is being insulted. Unlike material wrath born of selfish desire, anger used in the Lord's service is beneficial to all, being pleasing to Lord Krishna. So in the third canto of the Bhagavatam, there's a nice description that the younger brother of desire is anger. Have you thought about it like that? So the younger brother of desire is anger. And if one's anger is not fulfilled, then the younger brother, anger, if the desire is not fulfilled, then the younger brother, anger, follows. So even great saintly persons like the Kumaras were also angry. But they weren't angry because of their personal interest. They were angry because their service was being impeded. They were angry because they were forbidden to enter the palace of the personality of a Godhead. So there's the theory, and sometimes we'll hear that, well, people in the perfectional stage, they shouldn't get angry, It's not, and that is a theory, and it's not supported, Anger will continue even in the liberated stage. So the 4 mendicant brothers, the 4 Kumaras, they were liberated. But they were angry because, why? Because they were being restricted in their service to the Lord. So the difference between anger of an ordinary person and that of a liberated person is that an ordinary person becomes angry because their sense desires are not being fulfilled. Whereas the liberated person becomes angry when restricted in the discharge of their duties for serving the personality of Godhead. So there is I'll give a few examples. One, of course, is Jagai and Matai and Lord Nityananda, classic example. Actually, Lord Nityananda took it very cool. His head was bleeding. He took it very cool. He didn't respond. But the Lord responded swiftly. There was a great devotee from New Vrindavan. Her name was Ladini. And she went to serve in Africa. She was inspired to go to Africa and preach. And she was in a war-torn country called Liberia, and there was a rogue warlord. Although he didn't have an official position, he was rivaling the actual government there, and everyone was fearful of him. And somehow the devotees and Haladini had made some kind of an uneasy peace with this person through prasadam distribution. And so he appeared to kind of give them a little leeway. But then, people who are like that, demoniac people, they flip-flop in their minds. So just like Lord Hiranyakashipu, he's patting his son on the head one moment, and the next moment he's trying to kill him. You can't trust these kind of people. So then this guy, he flipped, and he came to the temple, and he called all the devotees out, and he told the ladies, you stay inside. He called the men out. Then he had them lined up. He didn't personally come. He sent his militia, his army, his soldiers, and he started killing them one by one. And when Haladini understood what was happening, she ran out, and she ran right up to the person with the rifles. You can't kill devotees. You can't do that. And they killed her too. But she could not tolerate that anger. That anger has nothing to do with her. It was on behalf of the devotees. So this type of anger, this is righteous anger. One time I was at a Pandal program, the second Pandal program in Mumbai. Maybe it was the first one, actually. But there was this big businessman who came, and he couldn't accept that God was a person and that he had a form. And afterwards, he came behind the stage where all the devotees were, and he was arguing with us, and he started to criticize Srila Prabhupada. And I just couldn't, I was like, how can he do that? And I became angry. And there was no plan in my mind. I just became angry. And I punched him in his stomach. And I just said, you can't speak about Srila Prabhupada like that. Giriraj Brahmachari was there at the time, and he was delighted. And Govinda Dasi, she became really angry in Hawaii, hearing the false words of a foolish so-called guru. And she was retorting them. And the followers of this false so-called guru, they accused her of not being loving. And she said, is it loving to watch you being cheated and say nothing? Prabhupada was very pleased with her. But best of all was Srila Prabhupada, when confronted with unrepentant Mayavadis. Srila Prabhupada was no Mr. Love and Light guru. He clearly defended his beloved Lord Krishna from the foolish words of false gurus. one time when we first arrived in Mumbai, there was a program at Chowpatty Beach, and we were invited, along with Srila Prabhupada, who was invited to speak. And it was a big program, and everyone there was a Mayavadi, except Srila Prabhupada and ourselves. So the first night we performed kirtan, and after all the dry speeches of the Mayavadis, it really ignited the mood of the crowd, and we got into it, and we just jumped, meaning the disciples. Prabhupada stayed on the stage, but we jumped off the stage and we started wandering through the crowd, getting them to chant, and they did. They stood up and chanted. So the next, it was just causing a big sensation. So the next night, what happened was we were in a more subdued mood, and the organizers, seeing how the audience had responded so favorably, they decided to make Srila Prabhupada wait until last to speak so that nobody would go. And Prabhupada was not happy about that, because then we couldn't, fortunately it was in Hindi, and we didn't understand it, although we understood it wasn't glorifying Krishna. So Srila Prabhupada, he wanted to speak and go, but had to wait till the end. So when we began chanting, the organizers wanted us to do the same thing, jump in the crowd, and but we weren't in that same mood. So they started pulling us by our saris and by our dhotis. And when Prabhupada saw that, he became angry. And without missing a beat, he had his kartals. He went up into the face of one of the organizers and he flashed his kartals, and made them stop this. And so after that incident, Prabhupada, he didn't go back to that program. And the incident is narrated in the Lilamrita, but the part where Prabhupada got angry and stood up with his kartals and made them stop harassing us, that part isn't mentioned. Another example of Srila Prabhupada's transcendental anger was in response to the attacks of the movement by devotees and the devotees by the deprogrammers. So maybe some of you don't know what these deprogrammers were, but these deprogrammers were definitely demoniac, deluded persons. And what they would do, this was like in the 70s, the parents of devotees would pay these people to kidnap their children, and in some cases, we were adults, maybe in their teens, but even in their 20s. They would kidnap the devotee children, and in very harsh, mean ways, try to deprogram. They would lock them up in a hotel room or some other place, and keep the lights off, and they would try to induce them all kinds of nasty sound, induce them to take drugs, induce them to eat meat. It was just despicable. So there was a big court case, and they were taking us to court on charges of brainwashing, extortion, and mind control. And this put Srila Prabhupada into a real fighting mood. And the more they were accusing us, the more stronger Srila Prabhupada became. And at one point, he got a letter from Tamal Krishna. It was a very long letter detailing the charges. Okay, 5 minutes, I'll end. Detailing the charges, and Srila Prabhupada wrote back. He was here in Vrindavan when he got the letter. It was in October 30th of 1976, and in that letter, he said, "They are now feeling the weight of this movement. Formerly, they thought, these people, they'll come and go. But now they're saying, now they see we're staying. We're not going anywhere. Now we have set a big fire. It will go on, and it cannot be stopped. You can bring big fire brigades, but the fire will act. The brainwashed books are already out there. Even if they stop externally, internally, it will go on. Our first-class campaign is book distribution. Go house to house. The real fighting is now. Krishna will give you all protection. So chant Hare Krishna and fight. By propaganda, you cannot suppress the truth. You cannot suppress the truth by propaganda. Now we have become strong to defend. The fighting has become acute, but you stick to the regulative principles. Krishna will give you all strength. Whatever is done is by Krishna's mercy. They are afraid of us. They're afraid of a different culture conquering over their culture. Whenever a higher taste is there, it's natural that if someone finds something better, they'll give up the old. How can they stop? And he concluded, it's a fight. Do not be afraid. So Srila Prabhupada was perfectly capable of taking up a fight and using anger in Krishna's service to defend his devotees and defend this movement. What to speak actually of the glorious fight for Hare Krishna land, and later on, after his departure, the wonderful fight for Bhakti-Vedanta Manor. So, somehow or other, this movement is going on. And somehow or other, by the grace of Srila Prabhupada, it is expanding. In fact, it looks like we've expanded beyond the borders of the Krishna Balaram temple. But in Vrindavan, the borders can miraculously expand. Otherwise, how could we all be fitting in here? And just like at the birth of Krishna, when Nanda Maharaj was giving out these like hundreds of millions of cows, and you may wonder, how could all these millions of cows, be contained within Vrindavan? Because Vrindavan is a transcendental place, and the borders can expand. In the same way, Krishna Balaram Mandir is a transcendental place, the borders can expand. But we have all come here together to glorify Srila Prabhupada on the pending day of his departure, which is slated for tomorrow. So among ourselves, there should be no fighting. But even if there is some fighting, Prabhupada said it's bound to happen, even the Pandavas would have some quarrels. We should know and not take this fighting seriously, because we're all here for the same cause, serving Sri Krishna. So a temporary disagreement can be there, but we should put it down easily and come together in our service to Srila Prabhupada and Lord Krishna. It's divine grace, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Okay, Gaur Premananda Haribol. So Guru Puja is the next on the agenda.